Hello everybody, this is Patrick from Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining me for another webinar. I'm going to speak today about combating the ivory trade. Just to say, of course, that we're coming up on the end of the year. A number of people have asked me during my travels recently, are we making any progress? We're all aware of this issue. Are we making any progress in the ivory trade? So I wanted to take this opportunity before we close the year to just give you an update on what's been going on, and to try and answer that question as best as I can. I know many of you have joined these webinars before. I'm going to speak for 15 or 20 minutes. You may submit a question at any time using the text box, and at the end I'll try to address a couple of those questions. Well, just to get us going, let me say, of course, the elephant. We all love them. The most iconic, I think, of all of Africa's wildlife. Of course, the logo of AWF. And I just want to give us as well the context to say that, it's not only that elephants live in the savanna and live in the forest. As many of us know, they actually create these ecosystems that the rest of wildlife lives in. We know that the great savannas, or the grasslands of Africa, are in large part maintained by elephants. And the way they push back the woodlands and the trees and actually maintain the savanna. I was speaking to a scientist recently about the African forest and heard about a new study in which they've been studying the size of various seeds that reproduce the trees in the forest. And that some of these seeds are so large that actually the forest elephant is the only animal that can disperse the seeds. So when we talk about the loss of elephants, we're not only talking about the loss of this wonderful species and these wonderful families, we're literally potentially talking about the unraveling of Africa's great savannas and Africa's forests, which are, of course, what it's all about and what our mission is all about. Now, for the last 20 years, AWF has been primarily concerned about the loss of habitat. As human populations grow, as cities grow, as agriculture spreads, the loss of habitat's been our biggest concern since sort of the end of the poaching wars of the 70s and the 80s. And just how ironic and sad it is to find us in the situation again where the tusk of the elephant is driving the species towards extinction again. I just want to remind us a little bit where we've come from. These are two ads that African Wildlife Foundation used in the 80s to address the crisis then and to educate consumers in the West. I actually think these ads were extremely creative. You could see the one there to the left, "Dressed to Kill. Would you kill an elephant for an earring?" And the whole idea was to make sure that the consumer understood. It's not about the poacher. You're driving this by consuming it. And the other one I also think is very powerful. "Today in America, someone will slaughter an elephant for a bracelet." So again, we're used to calling out the poachers, but it's not just the poachers, it's the consumers. And as we talk about how to educate people in Asia, I think these are some of the same messages that we want to be using. But again, we've been here before. Just to remind us, the tusk wars. In 1979, the overall continental herd of elephants in Africa was estimated at 1.3 million. We had that terrible poaching crisis for a decade, and at the end of it, the elephant herd was reduced by more than 50%, down to 600,000. And of course, what I'm wondering now is how far will the current poaching crisis take us down? Will we be halved again? You can see the losses last year, 2011 estimated at 25,000, and last year estimated at 35,000. And again, how many losses will we sustain before we stop at this time? My understanding of what succeeded last time is that we knew we had a runaway crisis, and the international conservation community found a way literally to slam on the brakes. And it took time, but by slamming on the brakes, and at the time with the CITES ban on the trade in ivory, the crisis was arrested, and the poaching leveled off, and elephants started to recover. The question is now, how long is it going to take us to slam on the brakes again and arrest the situation and hopefully get elephant numbers increasing again? I'm going to speak a little bit later about the recent Ivory Crush, but look at this picture. Look at these trinkets. What a poor trade humanity is making, trading a wonderful, even a single wonderful living elephant, a wonderful elephant family, the great savannas of Africa, the great forest of Africa for knickknacks and trinkets. It's a very poor trade, and I know there is some fine art that historically was produced in the Far East out of ivory. That's respected. That was at a different time in a different place. But as I looked at this ivory was being crushed, I just thought, you know, how pathetic. And again, what a poor trade we're making here as humanity. Now, you may have seen this slide before. This is AWF's sort of approach to the whole poaching crisis. There are different ways to cut the cake, but we really see the need to address it at 4 different levels. Support to boots on the ground, the actual protection work of specific populations on the ground. Then 1 level up, working on security and law enforcement. And then another level up, a push on the policy level and diplomacy. And finally, to curb demand and raise awareness. And what I found really is that in the mainstream conservation community, there's complete consensus about this. Some people ask us, well, you know, pick the one that's most effective. I don't think we have that choice. We need to try to intervene in the cycle and disrupt the whole cycle of poaching and trade at any of its vulnerable points. We can't experiment in saying, well, let's just do one of these things and see if it succeeds. We need to do them all. So I want to spend just a couple minutes updating you again on the work that AWF has been doing in the last year in these areas. First of all, on the ground. We have a new elephant protection strategy. We've looked very closely at the whole continent. We've looked at the best available science and the best available numbers on where elephants are. Elephants are not equally distributed around the continent. It's not even close. A lot of people don't know this probably, but Botswana has over 200,000 elephants. Kenya has about 20,000 elephants, 1/10 of the number. If you take the area around Victoria Falls in southern Africa, Botswana, Hwangi in Zimbabwe, and so forth, and then if you take southern Tanzania, the Selous and Katavi, those 2 populations together represent between 60 and 70% of all elephants. So again, elephants aren't equally distributed. What AWF has decided to do is to focus for the moment on 10 very important populations. As you can see from the slide, 4 of them are in southern Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, the sort of mid-Zambezi, and then Luangwa in Zambia. 3 populations in East Africa, 3 very important large populations, Tsavo in Kenya, and Raha and Selous in southern Tanzania. And then 2 populations in Central Africa, and these are, of course, the forest elephant, which can't be forgotten. So the Tri-National Park of Ja, Udzala, and Minkebe in Cameroon, Gabon, and Congo, respectively, and then Sanga in Central Africa. So this is to make sure we don't forget the forest elephant. And finally, we think it's very important that the region of West Africa not be forgotten. So a very important, the largest population of savanna elephants in West Africa, which is at Park W, a landscape where AWF has been involved for about the last decade. And what we are doing in these sites and with these populations is finding local partners on the ground, the park authority, sometimes local NGOs, sometimes local companies, anyone that we think we can work with effectively, assessing what they're doing. The Board of Trustees of African Wildlife Foundation has set up a special committee, Species Grants Committee, that is chaired by one of our trustees, Dr. Lynn Dolnick, and we are considering proposals and providing grants, small grants, to help strengthen the capacity of people to do specific protection work on the ground. This is very pragmatic, nuts and bolts stuff. Tents, radios, communications equipment, vehicles, in one case a hangar for an aircraft. This year, across a number of different species, elephants, rhinos, and large cats, we've given about $1 million in grants. Next year, we're hoping to do at least $1 million just on elephants, and then even more on other species. So, again, this is the on-the-ground protection work. This is in addition to work in sites where AWF is already working and where we have larger where we have larger programs, landscape programs. Now, the second level, again, that I talked about is the law enforcement area. This is the area that I sometimes half-jokingly call dogs, drones, and DNA. But we're looking for a way to help strengthen law enforcement efforts. This is our project with Kenya Wildlife Service to put sniffer dogs in additional airports and seaports. These are dogs that have been trained to find ivory and rhino horn. We know that the trophies are being transshipped out of Africa through key ports. Very interestingly, just this week, we've had a discussion about possibly hosting next spring at AWF headquarters in Nairobi sort of a dog summit. There is a group doing a study of the use of dogs throughout Africa, and we've realized we need to learn some lessons really quickly. Which breeds work best, which training works best, what feeding regime works best, and get the best lessons together and find out how we can scale up this dog work. Again, we feel that we need dogs at key airports, at key seaports, and a number of key border crossings between countries. Right now it's being done in a bit of a piecemeal way, and we want to find a way to scale it up. There are other investments that we're making here. For example, cross-training customs officials between Africa and key ports like Singapore and Hong Kong, so that they can be collaborating, around suspicious shipments and so forth. Going up another level again to the awareness work, I'm sure that many of you have heard about our collaboration with Wild Aid. This collaboration continues to grow. There are additional celebrities who have signed on in key Asian markets and who are doing PSAs, public service announcements, to educate the huge populations, really, of Asia about the destructiveness of consuming ivory and rhino horn. So this is one of the more recent PSAs you can see here. And our second effort is around a public service campaign within Africa, because we think it's very important that really just the normal guy or gal on the street in Africa realize that this wonderful resource is being stolen from them. When people collaborate with poachers, or when people poach, or if you have a corrupt customs official in the airport, or a corrupt army officer who's using army vehicles to smuggle ivory, that person is somebody's uncle. That person is somebody's brother-in-law. And so we keep saying, it's not enough for us to sort of wag our fingers at the Asians and saying, you're the cause of the problem. They're not doing it alone. There are Africans who are collaborating with them in this poaching work. Somebody knows who they are, and we need to get people to call them out and sort of end this culture of impunity. So this is part of AWF's African Voices campaign, where we really want to show, in this case, not international celebrities, but we want to show regular Africans and as well as well-known people with Africa standing up and saying, this is our wildlife, we have to protect it. So that was just a really quick summary of 3 of the 4 ways that we're trying to intervene in this poaching crisis. What I actually want to spend a little bit more time on today is then that other level, which is about sort of policy and international diplomacy. There has been really a flurry of activity over recent months. I was in Africa in June and came back to the United States in July, and very soon after my return, just before the 4th of July, I got this call about Secretary Clinton, former Secretary of State Clinton, wanting to convene a roundtable discussion of a number of conservation leaders on the poaching crisis and to see what could be done to address this together. In 1997, I had actually hosted she was not Secretary Clinton then, she was First Lady Clinton, and Chelsea Clinton in the Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania, so I'd had a chance to meet her before and talk to her about conservation issues. But this was a really big step. And out of this meeting that you see pictured here, we agreed to work together to come up with a big commitment that would be presented at the Clinton Global Initiative later in the year. As part of that gathering, Secretary Clinton mentioned that Bill and Chelsea were about to make a trip to Africa, and that they would be out doing various things related to the work of the Clinton Foundation, and invited Chelsea to come and see some of our work, And she did. This is Chelsea visiting our Lupani school in Zambia, and she visited several other AWF projects. And it's very interesting because in several speeches since then, Chelsea has used these projects and her experience visiting us on the ground in Africa to make the link between AWF's work with local communities and getting those same communities mobilized to help protect elephants. Well, carrying on then in August, there was the announcement of the Advisory Council on Wildlife Trafficking. And I had the pleasure of being one of the 8 people appointed to this advisory council. Now, a bit disappointingly, the council has not yet met. We were scheduled to meet during the time of the U.S. government shutdown, and it had to be postponed because of the shutdown, and so we've lost 2 months, which I think is very unfortunate. But the council is meeting Monday. So our first official meeting is Monday. The documents have just been coming in, and I've been studying them in preparation for Monday. But I think what I want to say about this group is it is quite an impressive group. There are people on for different reasons who really bring different things to the table. For example, the sort of there in the bottom right-hand corner, that John Webb he spent his whole career in the Department of Justice prosecuting wildlife crime. He was actually appointed by President Carter and has a long history in that. The guy above him from eBay, one of the concerns was about ivory products being sold on eBay. So there's the whole question of the involvement of the private sector. And other people from other important conservation organizations that bring a lot. I will say that one thing the council maybe is not too rich in is field experience and time on the ground in Africa and other countries. So I think that is something that I hopefully will bring to the council and make a real contribution on. Again, finally, we'll get our work going on Monday. The Clinton Global Initiative, whoops, that went just a little too fast. The Clinton Global Initiative is this big gathering that former President Bill Clinton convenes every year in New York City. It's the same week as the opening of the UN General Assembly, when a lot of heads of state and a lot of prominent people are in Africa. Secretary Clinton, President Clinton, and Chelsea used this year, one of the topics high on the agenda was to use this opportunity to gather a group of conservation leaders and then a number of African heads of state, including, you can see there, the president of Uganda is sitting right in front of me. I think it's the president of Ivory Coast next to him, and get a number of people on stage to make a public commitment to try and end the poaching crisis. So this is another really important bit of diplomatic outreach. Right after this event, we all rushed across Manhattan in the terrible traffic that the UN General Assembly calls. And because this was sort of an NGO thing, the United Nations General Assembly then held a special hearing on wildlife trafficking that was co-sponsored by Gabon and Germany. After our board meeting, which was in Nairobi this year, I went to Hong Kong. The gentleman next to me there is Christopher Lee, a new AWF trustee based in Hong Kong. And we had, I think, an important press conference in Hong Kong. We were both on the morning Drive to Work English language radio program. And Chris then also wrote a beautiful op-ed piece. And the name of the op-ed was "The Ivory Trade, a Stain on Sino-African Relations," a very passionate, very well-articulated piece that was in the op-ed of the big Sunday morning South China Morning Post, the biggest English-speaking newspaper in Hong Kong. So just really a flurry of activities. I came back from Hong Kong just in time for the Ivory Crush, which I think you've probably heard about. This was the U.S. government Ivory Crush. Let me give you a little bit of background on this. There are many countries, there are producer countries, transit countries, and consumer countries that have confiscated ivory and have stored it, and they have huge stockpiles. The United States has a repository in Denver, just outside of Denver, between Denver and sort of the Denver airport. And a decision was made to destroy this ivory and to use this really as a way to raise awareness about this issue. And really, in my view, what it does is it sends a message to the marketplace that the ivory trade needs to be closed forever, that there's no reason to hang on to this ivory. What are you storing it for? And, one of the guys from Fish and Wildlife Service, I was talking to him, and he said, "Can I tell you the story of how this crush really came about?" And I said, yeah, I'd love to hear that. He said, well, actually, I was out here on my annual inspections, and a lot of the ivory has been cracking in that very dry Denver air. And so the staff had submitted a budget request to install a very expensive humidifier system to keep the ivory from cracking. So I'm flying back to Washington considering this request, and I thought, here we are, our government has a big deficit. Why would we be buying an expensive humidifier unit to store something that we're saying has no commercial value? And so instead of buying the humidifier, the decision was made to destroy the ivory. The first idea was to burn it, which has been done in some countries like Kenya. And now I think because of global warming and some of the other issues that we want to make sure we're aware of, the decision was made to crush it. As you can see, a piece of big road building equipment, one of these crushers that's used for like crushing asphalt, was brought in, and the ivory was pulverized. And that people have been asked what's been done with the pulverized bits. Some of it is going to be used by the American Association of Zoos and Aquariums for public education in zoos and aquariums around the world, but the rest of it is basically compost. I mean, it's an organic product that has no real use and, of course, no commercial value. Again, many countries have these stockpiles. Gabon also recently destroyed theirs. And one of the things that the conservation community is promoting is the destruction of these stockpiles around the world. Because, again, I think it sends a clear, unambiguous message to the marketplace. Don't even think about the ivory trade. It is not coming back. There is no reason to hold on to this. And continuing to store it sends the wrong message. I think this is from the Philippines, the Philippines destruction. So as I say, some of them are producer countries, some of them are transit countries, and some consumer countries. Now, just to sort of come close to wrapping up here, what I really want to say is I think there has been huge progress really over the last 6 months in escalating this issue on the international stage. If you start with President Obama's executive order in July, the Clinton Global Initiative in September, the UN General Assembly special hearing in September. Earlier this month in Gaborone in Botswana, there was the World Conservation Union elephant meeting. They received a lot of press, and a lot of governments were there and made new commitments. And then in February 2014, the British government and the princes, who have taken a strong interest in this, are convening a high-level meeting at Lancaster House in London. And all of these, I think, serve to escalate this issue to the highest levels. I will be in London that week for those events, and I think finally we really do have the attention of the world scene, and I think this is real progress. So sort of in summary, can I say that it's gotten better, with all these efforts that we're doing and that other people are doing, many other important efforts from many organizations and many individuals? Unfortunately, I do not know of any data or of any concrete signs to say that the poaching is slowing down. In fact, I fear a little bit that it may be the opposite, that the poachers may be saying, wow, the world's beginning to wake up, we better get it now, get it while we can. So I hear the brakes being applied, I hear some screeching of the brakes, but can we actually say poaching is slowing down? I have seen no evidence for that yet. I don't think we should be too discouraged. This was, as I say, this was a fast-moving train, a big ship. You cannot slow it down so quickly. We knew it would take several months or several years before we would start to see improvements. But we just have to keep doing all the things that we're doing and more. And hopefully we will bring this poaching crisis to an end without again having the population of elephants. And that's what we'll be looking to see in the coming months and as we go into 2014. Now, the other thing is just about support from people like you who are on this webinar today and many other people. The public awareness about this issue is huge. People really are rallying to see what they can do. Many people have been generous to AWF. You're probably aware of this wonderful Betty White campaign that we have right now for the second year in a row. Betty White is helping us and challenging AWF members to make gifts that she is doubling with a match. And I think this is just one wonderful example of many people from different walks of life pulling together to try and address this poaching crisis. So I'm going to go to a few questions now. One of the questions is there an ideal number of elephants? What is the target continental herd? This is a great question. We have thought about this. I mean, in general, what we would like to use, at least as a working objective, is to maintain the pre-poaching levels, which is to say roughly 500,000 elephants. One of my real concerns is that when elephant numbers go down, habitat also gets surrendered. And so that later, even if the poaching stops, that the space that used to be available to wildlife is no longer there. So this interplay between the size of the continental herd and the habitat available for elephants is something that maybe people have not thought about enough. But as a minimum, we would like to retain that number that we had pre this crisis. Okay, another great question. Has AWF considered working with wildlife authorities in Africa to set up anonymous hotlines to report wildlife crime? We have considered this. We have not taken any action on it yet. One of our concerns that's sort of very much in the space is that we are aware of a number of places where crime is being reported. In some cases, arrests are being made, but prosecution is not following through. People get arrested and you go back and the person's not in jail anymore. Or again, the people involved maybe have political ties to important political figures or maybe in the military, and people are scared or intimidated to actually follow through. I was with some AWF trustees in Congo recently, and we heard about a very interesting case where a well-known poacher with political ties has been arrested and is up for prosecution, and they are so concerned that they are sending someone down to the jail twice a day to physically verify that he is still in his cell. It's just too easy for people to get sprung. So I think the anonymous hotlines and so forth is an important idea, and it's one part of it. But even if people get reported, we need to look through that whole chain of prosecution and making sure that people actually get sentenced and receive punishment. How will countries handle legal stockpiles acquired through natural mortality? You know, this is a great question. And of course, for years, people have argued that it should be possible to trade and use the ivory that's been acquired through natural mortality. Unfortunately, it is that legitimate sort of quote-unquote ivory that has created cover and doubt about all the illegal ivory. So in this case, I think what the conservation community is saying is let's not use even that ivory that was acquired through natural mortality. Has to be taken off the market because it creates doubt and it creates the ability to sort of whitewash illegal ivory that is the result of the death of elephants, the slaughter of elephants. Just to wrap up, I wanted to say that we are making a recording of this, which we will send to you. And if you would like to pass it on to friends or others who might be interested, that would be great, so that more and more people can know what's going on and what we're up to. I also want to thank everyone for your support through the year and to wish you happy holidays. And we look forward to continuing to cooperate with you in 2014. I know some of you make your philanthropic gifts and make your donations to AWF this time of year, and please don't forget us, and we look forward to your generous support. Happy holidays, everyone. Thanks.